my name is Gytis. I've been working with React Native for 3 years, and lately I've switched back to front-end development, but I really wanted to share a cool tool that I've been using while I was working with React Native. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to raise my hand and ask. Okay, so first of all, I'll tell what is Storybook, and maybe there are people who are aware what Storybook is in the first place.
Raise hand.
Yeah, would be good. Okay, so some of you are, that's great. And some of you will learn what it is. So I'll tell what it is. Why is it so popular suddenly? Then I'll go deeper into what React Native Storybook is. I'll tell you how to set it up, how to write stories for Storybook, and some additional benefits that I found by using it. And as mentioned in the description of the talk, I've been contributing to React Native Storybook for the past 3 years almost. So I'll try to share about my open source experience working with it. OK, so what is the Storybook? To make things clear, I took out the description out of the Storybook's website. And it is a tool for developing your UI components. It says a lot and it says nothing at the same time. So Storybook is a helper library. It doesn't really depend on what framework you use. It supports over 10 frameworks. So if you work with React, Angular, Vue, or some unknown framework, you might have you might find that it is compatible. So there are main 4 parts in the Storybook itself that really gives it its use. The first fact is that when you're using the Storybook, you're going to write stories. And stories are like simulations for your specific component scenario. So what it helps, how it helps, it allows you to build your components in a complete isolation. Instead of having them somewhere inside your app, somewhere inside your flow where you have to click multiple buttons to see the component, you immediately have a place where you can see all of your components and just have them without setting up all of your business logic like Redux or some other context. By building these components in the Storybook itself, you get a chance to mock hard-to-reach use cases. As I said, let's imagine that your component has a case where it only appears when a user fails to make some kind of transaction, and it's like a really big edge case. By using the Storybook, you can immediately see it every single time. Also, by creating those scenarios, you're kind of creating your own documentation. And the great thing about that this documentation you created without doing any additional work. As soon as you create a story, you have it for the future. And there's additionally some available add-ons that you can get from from other open source community developers, which enhance your Storybook experience. So, for instance, there is a knobs add-on which allows you to dynamically change the props of the component that you are seeing. There is source add-on which displays you the source of your component immediately on the website itself. For instance, you can see the test results next to the component if you are writing unit tests. And you can also get a documentation for your component props displayed next to the component. So I want to tell you why the Storybook is so popular. And it's really popular. It has over 45,000 GitHub stars and over 1 million downloads, npm installs a week. And the main reason why it suddenly became so popular is because the Storybook is a team tool. And when we are developing something, we are not working alone as programmers. We are working with a team. There are UX people, there are designers, there are product people who are not familiar with how to read or write the code. We are familiar with what a component is, what a view is, and they have a chance to see what we are developing and play around. So let's imagine the usual development flow. Let's say we have a designer who is working on some kind of design, And usually he doesn't know what exactly is developed in our app. So he has to go to the developer and ask for additional information. The developer looks to the source code, and he tells it back to the designer. And this loop goes on multiple times till the designer can create something that is actually useful in existing app. And only then the developer can finally start to create it. With using Storybook, we are kind of removing one of the steps because designer can immediately see all of the components that are created in your app. So he can work alone, and only then, after he knows that everything that he did is actually possible to implement, he can give it to the developer, and the developer can immediately work on it. This way, we reduce the feedback loop time, and we make things simpler. And here at Wix, we also use Storybook a lot. There are multiple teams who use the Storybook, and one of them is Wix Style React. And I think I'll quickly show you examples because I'm talking a lot and I'm not showing anything for you. One moment. So here we go. Let's make it simpler. And in Wix Style React, we have both developers and designers are working with it. We have some components that we can see. We have example descriptions. We have live code editing here. We have the whole API of it. We have a test kit information, how to use it. And we also have a playground where you can change the props. So let's say if we change a text here, it immediately changes in the component itself. So this experience is really powerful for designers because they don't have to work with code. They can just actually work with real components that are created in the app and see them. And what I'm showing you right now is Storybook for React. I'll go to Storybook for React Native a little bit later, but because Storybook for React Native is a little bit different beast because it works in a simulator. And it's a little bit more difficult to use. So at first, I wanted to show an example of what React Native Storybook is actually trying to achieve. So I think the best way to explain what React Native Storybook is to show you all an example. And we have a Wix mobile app where we also are using the React Native Storybook. This is the React Native Storybook. We have a place where we display the story itself. In our case, it's a critical one app, Wix mobile app flow, where we had to make sure that it's fully tested. So we created many stories for it. For instance, we had a case where we display a button to message the owner. We had a case where we display loading state. We have a case where we display empty, and I think it's over 15 different cases. And all of them are displayed in one specific place. It's grouped by the screen name. So we have, I think, over 100 stories overall. And when we select some kind of a case, you can see it. It's really lagging, sorry. You can see it, and you can also play around with it. We have the same knobs functionality you saw in the web before, so we can say that the screen is loading, and immediately see that the loading state. We can even, it's not only some toggles, we also can change, for instance. It's really running hot, sorry. We can also change the objects themselves, and all of these things are props for this screen. Let's go to the setup. Setup itself is really easy. We created a helper library called Wix React Native Storybook Template, where we take care of all the necessary configuration. And all we have to do is import getStorybook UI. And what it does, it is a function which requires a story list, which I'll tell you soon how to write. And it returns the view component that you can put anywhere, as I already said. OK, so writing stories themselves is, let's imagine we have a simple component. I called it chapter title. And I'm going to make it a little bit more interesting by adding some additional functionalities. So first, I create a default case for it. So I write inside my stories file stories off. I give it a name. So it's a group name. In this case, I call it chapter title. And then I start to add different scenarios, different stories for it. So in this case, I added the default case, and it's going to return chapter title, default title. And you can see it here. Let's imagine we added some additional cases. Maybe we want to make the chapter title bold. So we create additional add. We write chapter title, bold, and you can see it here. And this way, we keep on adding additional stories for our own component, and you can always see them together. Now, well, I mean, it's really that easy to start to use it. If you wanted to try it out, it would take less than 15 minutes with installation and actually putting on the storybook and maybe adding one of your components inside. And this loop of creating component, creating stories for it is the main core benefit, in my opinion, for the storybook, because by doing these things, we are creating documentation without actually having to go and write the documentation. While working on the React Native Storybook, I also found some additional benefits. So because we are creating stories which are different scenarios for our app, we can do testing for them. We could write unit tests, we could write component tests. But one great thing that I worked on is screenshot testing, because by using screenshot tests, we do not have to do any additional work. As soon as we create a story, we automatically get a screenshot test case for it. So in this case, we are using Applitools tool, which displays us together all of the screenshots. And if someone does some kind of change, we can see it here. So for instance, somebody worked on updating the screen details. And then in our pull request, we see that hey, something has changed. Go on and confirm that you wanted these changes. And we go see that it actually was changed. We confirm it, and we got good to go. And we had multiple cases where we actually found other teams' accidental changes because they affected our team components. And this was really good because we didn't have to do manual testing to find them. And because we didn't have screenshot tests, we notified them that, hey, something has changed. Also, React Native Storybook supports async storage. So if, for instance, you do not have an ability to use fast refresh, which was included lately, it allows you to do poor man's fast refresh, because you can manually refresh the app, and it will automatically open the last open story. So in the web, people have hot reload. They had it for a few years, but React Native is not that happy about it yet. Yeah, the React Native 61 added fast refresh, but if you are stuck with an older version, it can help. One thing that I feel is really important that helped the whole team while using the Storybook is making sure that we write components we properly structure our components. A few years ago, it was really common for people to make sure your business logic is separated out from your view components, to make sure that you put the business logic inside Redux. But lately we got hooks, and with hooks everyone is putting everything inside once again, and they're not really trying to separate things out. By using Storybook, you have to create components which are isolated from your business context. So you create container components, which might have hooks or which may connect to Redux, and then you create representational components which only care about UI experience itself. And this way, during the development of our app, we found that people are still trying to make sure that we don't put everything in one place. Also, React Native Storybook has few cool features like VS Code add-on, which displays you the story list inside VS Code itself. And also there is one for WebStorm. So you can click on the stories, and you will immediately see the same story in a simulator nearby. It simplifies the experience while working on some kind of component. Or if you are a Vim user or Emacs user or just don't want to add add-ons, you can use controlling from the browser. If you don't like clicking on a simulator, you get the same story list and the add-ons list here as you would get on the simulator itself. As I said, I also want to tell you a little bit about open source and the Storybook. And there's one important thing to know about is the Storybook's history itself. Storybook was created in 2016 by a startup called Gytis. They created Storybook immediately as soon as they created the Storybook. They open sourced it, but they were the only maintainers of it. The community wasn't really involved. They created issues, maybe created some PRs, but Gytis was responsible for all of the maintenance of React Native of the Storybook. Sorry. And then a common thing happened. Gytis, the startup, it got shut down, and you can see how the maintenance went down and down because people didn't have a reason to work on it anymore because they thought they will make money from the Storybook. And people got worried. They asked, is this project dead? And inside that issue, some people said, hey, we would gladly take over the project and make sure that it's properly open sourced, that we include the whole open source community in it, and that no one tries to benefit from the project because it's really cool, it's popular, and we want to use it. And Gytis was really nice, and Gytis company was really nice. They gave the access rights to open source community, and you can see that it started to get maintained again. And this is a history from 2016 to mid-2017, and this is the history now. Inside the red box, you can see what was in the previous slide, and afterwards, when the community was involved, you can see how more maintenance it started to get. I also would like to tell you how I got familiar with Storybook and how I got involved in contributing to it. When I joined Wix 3 years ago, I learned about a concept here called Guild Days and Guild Weeks, where we can spend 20% of our time learning new things or contributing to our product experience, development experience. And one thing that I had trouble working with was React Native, our own React Native UI library. And I thought maybe I can make this experience smoother. So I talked to them, and they said that some tool called Storybook, maybe you would like to try it out. And I tried it out, and it was really hard to use back then. But since I always wanted to contribute to open source because I learned a lot of things from the internet. I never paid for my lectures, and I thought I really want to also share my knowledge and do something, give back to the community. I thought maybe I could try to improve it. So I started to do that. At first, React Native Storybook was a separate process that you had to start from. So you had to kill the packager that you are using for your normal app, start a different one, restart your app, and then you could see it. That was a really bad experience because you couldn't use it while working. You had to either use Storybook or use your app. So that's what was the first thing that I tried to fix, to make sure that you can put Storybook inside your app itself to make the development experience easier. I managed to do that, and then some people also thought about putting the story list inside React Native Storybook itself. After we did that, I thought maybe we could try to adding the add-ons themselves, because then we could get the full experience in our React Native app. And that's what I started to work on, and you can see my first version of it. I'm really, really proud of it because I spent, I think, close to 2 weeks working on making sure that I can drag this panel, resize it, and then I showed it to other Storybook maintainers. They said, it looks like Windows. What you're doing, do something else. So we scratched this idea, And then we went with the design I showed you before, where we have sliding panels. I'm still not it's still not the best experience, but it's definitely better than this one. So maybe someone else will have some other ideas how to make it easy. So I've been working with React Native Storybook for almost 3 years now, and during this time I also got a chance to fulfill my other wish that I had for a really long time. I always wanted to write a blog post, but I always thought I don't have what to share, And while working on these features, I got a thing to write about. We released Storybook version 4, and I created a blog post about what's new in React Native Storybook. And this blog post got over 10,000 views as a first blog post. I was really proud about it. And afterwards, I already wrote a few more. And it's really it feels really great that by working on open source projects, I got a chance to fulfill some of my wishes. And now also, talking in front of you now for the first time. Some issues happened, but I guess that's normal. And yeah, so what I want to say is that if any of you want to contribute to open source project, but you're afraid or don't know how to start, Storybook is a great project to do that because we have over 900 contributors. And then there's one person called, his name is Norbert. He spends a really long time to make everyone welcome to contribute. He goes on and explains how the project works from inside. He tries to help find some issues that someone might be interested to work in. And we have also a big list of good first issues that someone might work on. And people do work on them. We have over close to 100 such issues already solved, and most of them are solved by first-time contributors. So that's really great. If you're up to challenge, there is React Native Storybook roadmap. As I said, it has a lot of things to do, but those tasks are going to be a lot harder. But if you want to try them on, feel free to contact me, and I would gladly help you try it out, because I was also really afraid of doing it, but I got a chance to try it out, and I know that I only got to try it out because some other people helped me to start. And there's one additional example that I wanted to show, but I already spoiled it. It's this presentation. I did it on Storybook itself, so you can see the same navigator where I created all my chapters. I also have all of my screens prepared, all my images, components, etc. And I can also play around. I wanted to do it during the presentation, but due to some issues, I thought I'll not do that. But you can see that everything is changing. I can see the code for the slide. I can see my presentation notes. Yeah, so I want to say thank you. I thought it's going to take a little bit longer, but and to make sure that you try it out, I created a small README with the 4 steps. I'll also open up later on the slides. I really recommend to try it out, because if I worked on any small project, I would use Storybook because it doesn't take any additional effort to use it. I can just install it, and it exists. Even if I don't use it, I don't lose anything by installing it. And it really helps on, because we had cases where we had a screen that we didn't work for a year, but when we opened it up, and we had all the previous cases already documented. So I knew that by developing a new feature, I'm not breaking anything that was developed before. You could also write, usually also write tests for it, but getting stories to work, it takes tremendously less time to then write, proper unit tests. Yeah, so that's it.